Hello, everyone. This is the DIAMAS conversation series for libraries, the first edition, and the title is Advancing Diamond Open Access in Europe. DIAMAS is a project. You will hear more in a second, but this specific conversation series, which will be a series of events dealing with different topics related to Diamond Open Access Publishing, is organized and managed by Spark Europe and Eiffel and other DIAMAS project partners will be joining us during the next session. They will be present today, and we will discuss different topics. For those of you who are not familiar with this project, DIAMAS is a Horizon Europe project. It started in September 2022. It will last for 2 years. We are well into the project now. We have quite some results to share. And the participants of this project include 23 public service scholarly organizations from 12 European countries, and many of these are associated with libraries because libraries play an important part in institutional publishing, in open access publishing, and especially in Diamond Open Access publishing. These are the main project objectives. There are many smaller objectives, but these are the main ones. So to provide the research community with an aligned, high quality and sustainable open access scholarly communication ecosystem. We will talk in the next session that will be announced in the end. We will talk more about standards. Then to create a community supporting services and non-technical infrastructure for institutional publishing service providers that adopt common standards, guidelines, and best practices, and to develop common standards, guidelines, and best practices. So this sounds quite abstract, but in this project, we will create a standard that will be presented next time. It's already packed and wrapped up. So next time you will hear more about this. There will be a common access point. This is a kind of a central web portal where you can get access to various resources and tools and guidelines and registries, publishers, service providers, etc., that can help you manage various publishing operations. And also we will create a community. There will be training materials, so you will hear more during the next session as we proceed in developing these results. Here is the link, a very simple one. We already have quite some results, and you can visit this link and see the list of the project deliverables, of some supporting materials, and in the end of the session we will also share some advocacy materials that can be useful for you, specifically for you as libraries. So this link is for all the project results. The purpose of this conversation series is to actually provide some informal engagement space where we can share the project results, but we can also discuss these results and various issues related to Diamond Open Access publishing with you. And we can also develop community for Diamond Open Access. So in the DIAMAS project, we've developed clusters of stakeholders. We identify them and will be addressing them through various events. So libraries are one of the stakeholders. We've developed some use cases related to libraries, and we would like to discuss all these things and also the training materials, the project outputs with you, and to adjust them to your needs and to include your feedback in our further activities. Our program for today is, after this brief introduction, you will hear more about the Diamond Open Access landscape and about the study that's been published and the research behind it. After that, you will hear more about another piece of research done within the DIAMAS project. It's on financial sustainability, and it's presented in deliverable and supporting materials and a series of reports preceding this deliverable. After that, we will have a discussion in breakout rooms. It will last for about 30 minutes, and then for about 20 minutes, we will be reporting about the outcomes of this discussion. And finally, we will share some materials with you and hear from you about your impressions. I'll now stop sharing, and Jan Erik, over to you.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. Now I will make an attempt on sharing my presentation. I hope that works. Hopefully you are now seeing a screen with my presentation in presentation mode. I see nodding, so that sounds good, or looks good. Let's see now. I get some info in the wrong place here. Okay. I've been heading work package 2, and I would like to say something about what we've done. The background for this DIAMAS project is that some earlier research showed that there were serious problems with the structure of open access publishing. The Open Access Diamond Journal study, which I was part of, found a wide archipelago of relatively small journals serving diverse communities. It was spread around in small entities. We know that Diamond OA is an important part of institutional publishing. Now, DIAMAS is to look at institutional publishing, but in reality, that will much be centered around Diamond, which is the major part, especially in the journal publishing landscape. So what to do about this problematic organization? Well, work package 2 was settled to create a description, a foundation, a knowledge foundation for the rest of the work in the project. And we had nearly all project members, organizations represented in work package 2, some 40 competent and interested persons from around 20 organizations participated and put a lot of work into creating this landscape report I will be saying something about. We started work in September 2022 and delivered the report at the end of November 2023. So it was a long process. We had a little to build on. No data had previously been collected on institutional publishing as such. A lot of different projects delivering various data, but not collected in this way that we needed. And we found no organizations that were geared to institutional publishing as such on the European level. We had to start from scratch, and we initiated a large survey that was sent out widely. I think we sent out to some 5,000 individual email addresses, and we sent a lot of email lists and organizations and asked them to send out this survey. So we probably reached out to at least 10,000 email addresses around Europe. Institutional Publishing Service Provider, or IPSP, is a central term that you will find in a lot of our outputs. This covers institutional publishing activities. It covers service providing to such institutional publishing activities, or institutions that combine institutional publishing and service providing to institutional publishing. So what did we get? We got nearly 700 responses that we could use. We got more responses, but some were incomplete or in other ways couldn't really be used, and some were from outside the geographical scope. We found a rather uneven geographical distribution of responses, but what we saw looking more closely is that most countries in the area were adequately represented. Our numbers indicate that a major part of IPSPs are represented, but as usual, the smallest IPSPs are underrepresented. There's always the single journal publisher is often very absent from this kind of service. 3/4 of respondents were institutional publishers and 1/4 were service providers. And 90% published journals. Most of them published very few journals. Less than 5 journals was the most. Is the most, or most of them. Sorry. Some major findings. Well, one thing that surprised us a bit was that countries are more different than regions are. We had planned analyzing data on a regional basis, but very early found that was meaningless because countries within a region would be more different than regions are. And what we also found is that organization of scholarly publishing activities on a national scale is very important. That has to do with support and administrative structures, networks and organizations in countries or not having such networks, and funding opportunities, which are nearly always on a country basis. Looking at financing and organization, we see that roughly 2/3 are non-commercial public organizations, while the service providers are more likely to be private companies. Service providing is an area where you can actually earn some money. Roughly 60% of IPs and service providers are part of a parent organizations. Most respondents perform small-scale activities, which is heavily dependent on voluntary and in-kind contributions. And that means, for instance, that you have problems scaling up if you're successful. The success comes without added resources. Diamond model is very common, but APCs are used as a revenue stream by 19% of open access journals publishers. But that doesn't mean that 19% of journals use APC, because if a large publisher has one journal using APC, they would have said yes to this question. But still indicates that APCs is relatively common, also institutional publishing. Maybe more surprising is that the voluntary author contributions is used by nearly 1/4 of all respondents. And this could be an interesting path to pursue for journals in the future. More financing. More than half of publishers that only publish Diamond, they rely on fixed and permanent funding from parent organizations. 20% also rely on periodically negotiated funding from the parents, and they place a high reliance on this. 30% rely on content and print sales, but they place a low reliance on this. So that is one income stream, but not necessarily the most important. Some 70% would consider cooperating with others to save costs. That should also be explored further, I think. This is not in all areas, but for instance, IT services, production services, and training and support. These are the most important areas, with more than 40% inclination to cooperate. Looking at open science practices among respondents, we find that double anonymous peer review is the most common, with 3/4. Open peer review is used by 17%, but 30% of respondents say they're willing to implement this in the future. And I think many use OJS as a publishing platform, and open peer reviews is not currently very well implemented in that software, but they are working on becoming better. So in the future, probably more will use open peer review. Among respondents, 90% of journal output is open access, 76% of conference output, and surprisingly high, nearly 60% of academic books are also open access. What stands out is that in Eastern Europe, nearly 100% of journals are open access. And academic journals is the most important output. More than 90% of our respondents use this format. So that means the discussion tend to be concentrated on academic journals. 80% of respondents adhere to open access or open science policies on some level or other. National, institutional, or their own. There are very strong variation between countries. National policies are not necessarily important to all countries. And in at least one country, a national policy that doesn't exist seems to be very important for a response in that country. And policies are mostly important for open access journals. And this probably has to do with policies being more well developed for open access journals than for other kinds of output. Less than half consider their content well indexed, and more than half want improvement. More than 60% say they have a problem in satisfying technical and non-technical participation criteria and metadata criteria. More than 40% have problems with paying for membership and recurring charges. And this is more a problem for smaller institutional publishers than for bigger. And that is a general finding in many such reports. And we can say that areas of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging is generally not well implemented. It's on the bad part of the scale generally. Some takeaways. The typical institutional publisher is small and rather alone, and they need better, more stable, more reliable, and more long-term financing. And long-term is not 3 months, but at least 3 years, I think. They need partners to cooperate with. They need support. Competence must be made available, advised on best practices and how to best align with these, and support on how to implement such practices and technical options to conform with good standards. But we also see a strong willingness to align with such practices and standards. So there is definitely good hope here. Try to look at the role of libraries. We see that nearly 60% of respondents have a parent organizations. 36% does not have a parent, and 8% don't know whether they have a parent. Among institutional publishers, 8% are part of a library in the parent organization. And surprisingly, nearly half of respondents that are institutional publishers don't know who their parent is. Among service providers, we see that a quarter are a part of a library in the parent organization. So that means that we can at least say that libraries are major actors, especially when it comes to service providing. Institutional publishing is often concentrated on around editors and a subject field, so it's quite natural that the publishing might be centered around a department, in a scholarly department, while the support and service providing is concentrated in the library. So we see that libraries are important for this. So this meeting is actually a major publishers meeting, if you weren't aware of it. We have some results ready for you to read. There's a treasure trove found at the address that you probably can't read very well, but you will have this presentation afterwards. This is a list of outputs from work package 2. We have the final landscape report. This is a nearly 240-page report filled with numbers and graphs and text. You should be aware that work package 2's outputs are mostly intended for the further work in the project, but are made available to you so that you can find information there. We have a synopsis of the results, which is a much shorter version that is intended for more general readership. And we have country reports for ranging from a few sentences to 15 pages, depending on how much data we have and how much we have to say, where you can find your own country described. I should say also that in addition to work package 2 has, work package 3 will probably next week release the DIAMAS Open Access Standard, which includes, for instance, a self-assessment tool where you can check your compliance with quality and understand how to move your publishing operations to an equitable model, how to diamondize your journal. So keep listening to us, and you will get more information. We will deliver more things in the months to come. Want to hear my voice more? There's a podcast available discussing the findings in the landscape report. I say thank you. I'll be back in the discussions.
Thank you, Jan Erik. The following presentation is by Vanessa Proudman, and it is dealing with the financial sustainability in Diamond Open Access. Over to you, Vanessa.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Milica. So my name is Vanessa Proudman. I'm Director of Spark Europe, and I'm also the work package lead for exploring and supporting the sustainability of institutional publishing. And I'm going to tell you briefly today what has DIAMAS told us about sustaining diamond OA so far. I will be repeating a couple of things that Jan-Erik has told you, but at least the message will then get super clear. I'm particularly going to be focusing on gathering the evidence before we support the community going forward to create this rich, more equitable open access ecosystem. We've been working at DIAMAS in this work package to first of all, gather evidence to gain a better understanding of the costs, the funding and the business models that institutional publishers, particularly diamond ones, are grappling with. We want to raise awareness of their funding needs and options. And so through that work, we're providing intelligence, and today is part of that process, in effect, to also present or share more innovative models and financial models and build capacity in this area. And what we'd also like to do is to see how can we reduce some of the costs for publishers and their service providers by through collaboration and convergence. So we're particularly going to focus today on gathering, on the evidence that we've been gathering. So again, a lot more content to get your heads around today. We, as a group, conducted an extensive literature review from across Europe in different languages. We had two quantitative surveys, one of them Jan-Erik told us about, but another one where we went in much deeper into the questions of financial sustainability. And then even further, in more depth, we had focus groups from different parts of Europe, and we also had a number of interviews with some service providers in particular. So first of all, from some of the findings, what I'd really like to highlight here is the importance of, let me just move that, sorry, the importance of the people behind OA Diamond. What we find is that the majority of the diamond publishers, they really rely more on in-kind contributions than on monetary resources, and that's the persons running those journals, maintaining those journals, growing them. And the most frequent in-kind support that we identified through all of this evidence gathering, who have a parent organization, they're drawing on resources that provide them with IT services, as well as the facilities and the premises, of course, where they are and where they reside. Human resource management, as well as, of course, the staff needed, as I mentioned, and financial and legal services, which is really crucial when running a journal. So what's really crucial for the sustainability of Diamond, first and foremost, is the people, and to continue to recognize their efforts and reward those efforts going forward. So their strong commitment is really crucial to the future of OA Diamond. But aside from the in-kind contributions and the people, we also need funding resources, income streams to support our efforts as diamond publishers and service providers, and that includes libraries. So who do the diamond publishers and service providers rely on? 2/3 on a parent organization, we heard from Jan-Erik, but that means that 1/3 don't rely on a parent organization and are usually juggling a number of different income streams. So they can't depend on the generosity of a parent organization. 1/3 also depend on a very reliable, strong source of income from public organizations. Some of those are time limited, but many are not. And those are the things that we would really like to see a lot more of, that stable, secure public funding going forward. What we did find that so far that research funding organizations are not contributing to Diamond so far so much, but we we are talking to them, and we do see signals, concrete signals, where research funders are contributing and starting to think about how to contribute to OA Diamond. So that's good news. We know that there are a number of publishers and service providers that are funded on local level. So either through national funding or regional or local funding. And that, when I say local, it could be the institutional subsidies, but it could also be library funding, like an open access fund. But what we do see is that almost all of that funding is only funding local content or services that are hosted in that particular country where of the funder. So what happens to some of those services that are serving many that are outside of the country that your publisher depends upon? So who is covering the costs of operations for that service, like for OJS, for example? So what's really key here is to fund the operations, but also to enable some of those operations to scale up, because we are seeing enthusiasm from authors, if there are libraries or others that have university presses who want to flip, who are also taking the diamond route. So we need to have funding to be able to scale up. So seed funding can help boost efforts or innovate, and that's very important. It is being used to sustain operations, so that's a concern. But we still need that to obviously to continue and to boost our efforts. And the other streams of funding, which Jan Erik mentioned, the APC and the voluntary author contribution, we also see member fees as being important. Library OA funds were mentioned, and other collective funding models, as well as other types of subsidies or endowments. So there is a range of income streams. So, but how, if you depend on a range of income streams, or even if it's 2 or 3, that means that this stretches you as an organization or as a publisher, usually small, only running on maximum 50,000 euros, roughly, depending on which country you're in and the scope of your service, of course. But, you know, it's not a high cost service. But if you have to manage 2 or 3, that's quite taxing for you. So that brings also instability, because of course it's often time limited. A number of these resources are time limited. And of course the resources that you may have been able to bring in through that funding, like staff resources, they then leave you. So that's not the ideal way forward, but that is a fact at the moment. But there are some good consequences of some of this time-limited funding or grant funding, where there are requirements from the funders to report on expenses and revenues. And what's been missing for a while is to have an understanding of what the costs are, particularly for the service providers, but also for some of the publishers. And if you need a grant, you will need to report on that. And what we've seen with our study is that we do notice that many are following the formal accounting practices of their parent organizations or of those grant providers. So we are getting a better understanding, as are they, of the cost of Diamond. So what are some of the key challenges that we identified with all of that research? So first of all, okay, no surprises there. There's a lack of financial resources across the board. Even those who have that stable public funding, they are, some of them are just getting by or not quite getting by. So the majority are really needing further financial support. I I think I mentioned when talking about the in-kind contributions, there is some lack of stability there because, of course, you're dependent on the staff that you have and on the permanence of that staff. And so the dependence on the parent organization is also a challenge there because you depend on the resources that are generously provided to you. So those are some of the key challenges identified. Looking at the libraries in the first survey, so 12% of the respondents were libraries. I looked at some of the library data that came from those countries on that slide there. And what we see is that the very large majority of the libraries are struggling with some of the resources needed for infrastructure and services to support publishing, or to be able to maintain the interoperability with other services. Also, to get the peers supply the metadata or make metadata available for use, having sufficient resources for that, or to archive, backup, or preserve content and software. So these are really big issues and challenges, in particular for us as libraries. What we did see is that about half of the libraries would like to see their publications indexed better in search engines, but it was also very good to see that a bit less than half were doing actually a good job and actually mentioned that. So there's still quite some work to be done, but there is also quite some expertise to get that material well indexed. Now, something also close to my heart is thinking about how do we collaborate going forward to see how we can reduce the costs. I think what we saw was that 70% expressed their wish to collaborate more to save costs. So that's very good news, potentially. And it's particularly in the areas of production services and IT, where the institution lacks some of that competence. But also in communication services and in training and support. But of course, with that, there are also challenges that come with that. So there are limitations to with whom you can collaborate. Is it within the institution or external to the institution? How can you scale up, or to what extent are you able to? Also, what kind of technical and skill competencies are available to you, or do you have in that collaborative context? And of course, sometimes collaboration takes more time than if you did it yourself, but for the greater good and for bigger, more ambitious projects, it's certainly worthwhile to clearly collaborate going forward. So we want to explore that avenue also going forward a bit more. So in as regards infrastructure, many reported using shared global infrastructures like DOAJ, Crossref, and ORCID, and also some of those hosting and publishing solutions like OJS or the Open Monograph. So I think that's no surprise, really. But there were 60% reporting that some of the membership fees for some of that activity, they find difficult to come up with the cash to be able to contribute to certain services to be able to deliver. And of course, we shouldn't forget that some of the infrastructures upon which we depend are not always completely financially stable. So they do need injections of funding to fund their operations. So we need to consider that when we want to further sustain it. So just recapping, the need for action is really to strengthen that reliable, permanent public government funding. More international funding is needed from the research funding organizations to help us with those bigger projects and those innovations as well. And for the bigger services that serve many. We need time-limited grants to innovate and to, for the moment, until we find other models that work, but we shouldn't rely too much on those because of the challenges I already explained. And we need to provide funds for those infrastructures that we depend upon. And we really need to acknowledge the importance of in-kind and voluntary work. So where can libraries help us? And I think that's my last, pretty much my last slide. Sorry, I'm just hiding. There we are. What libraries can do is continue to advocate and educate for strong metadata, PIDs, standards, preservation, and open licensing within your institution. And if you are yourself a publisher or supporting your local publishing efforts, also help with indexing and scale up where possible. So I know not all of you are publishers, but libraries have many different roles, as you'll see on my slide here. And I think what's important also is for libraries to develop strong working relationships with university presses that are not always within the libraries. Some of you do have those at home with you. And also to work with other infrastructures as you support your authors or publishing instances in your institution, or as you want to drive more equitable open access. So that's also a way that you can support Diamond by making more of that as a really good, strong option, quality option for your authors. Of course, you're also funding, publishing, funding Diamond. You can fund your own local publications, services and infrastructures at home in your institution, but also you can help contribute to national new capacity centres or international capacity centres that help build capacity for your local initiatives, or develop new IT or production services at a lower cost by working together with others. So you can contribute either through cash or in kind. And of course, what you can also do is explore new ways of funding Diamond. So reallocating some of the funds that you have in your collection budgets for Diamond OA. I think that's really important, although we understand it's not easy. And lastly, it's crucial to really collaborate and organize ourselves. We've seen some countries are very well organized around Diamond and some less so, but we are really mobilizing ourselves a lot more now. And I think libraries can do that to build capacity in this area. So I'm going to just tell you that there's a lot more coming still in the DIAMAS project. We are going to identify areas of potential collaboration, share those with you. We've got a self-assessment tool for sustainability coming out soon, and we're going to be developing a suite of sustainability resources, which we're going to be asking you today about what do you need going forward, what would help you to better sustain your service or your publication outfits. So here's more information if you need it. Jan-Erik already shared lots of links, but I think the key one for us is the research report into the financial sustainability of institutional publishers and service providers. There is an executive summary, but you can also dive in deeply. So thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to the discussion a bit later. Thanks.
Thanks, Vanessa. So we have the time. So do you have any questions relating to these two presentations? We can discuss this even later, but if you have any immediate questions, I don't see any in the chat. You can just write them in the chat, or you can just raise your hand and ask the question. Yes, Mary, please go ahead.
Sorry. Yes, it was not clear for me if you mentioned precisely the role of open source, because people say that they would like to share a lot of services, in particular for the computer side, I mean the programming side of it. But what is the role, and can we converge toward the fact that open source for the platform should be a must?
That's Vanessa, will you answer or?
So, I mean, I was looking at the data on sharing resources and collaborating and working on shared services for DIAMAS. So indeed, we did not ask whether that should be open source. And I think it's a really good point. And we should think about open software and open source and to what extent is the infrastructure open, right? When we promote certain things going forward. I really like that comment. We did ask in the bigger survey, Jan Erik, about open source, I think, but I just don't have the data with me here. We can probably come back to you on that one. So we did want to understand to what extent are people using open source, but I was just focused on the financial sustainability today, so I can't give you more data, but I'm sure we can come back to you, Marie. Thank you for the question.
I'm sure you will save money if people share their software.
So I can say that
we solve a part of the finance problem at some stage. You know, if people share this development of new tools.
So the extensive report, not the synopsis, you have the links shared, contains a section dealing with the technical service efficiency. And it's about, as far as I remember, Jan Erik, it's more than 80% of the respondents used open source software. OJS was the dominant tool used, and there were other tools. And also, what is important, there was a number of service providers who actually adapted open journal systems. So it was huge. It was predominant among the responses. One of the things that we explored when developing this Diamond Open Access standard, and one of the important documents was the POSI principles, the principles of open infrastructure, which contain references to open source software, to the openness of infrastructures, etc. The problem is that, I mean, it's not really a problem, but DIAMAS doesn't really provide that many technical answers to many technical questions, because it's basically not a technical project. There is another project, CraftOA, and it deals with open source a lot, and it seeks to how should I say, to improve the interoperability between different open source solutions. For example, to be able to migrate the platform developed using one open source software solution to another one, also based on open source, for example, between Janeway and Open Journal System, etc. So we are not discussing this in great detail in this project because it's a bit technical, but it is developed by other projects, and we will be using and making references to the resources developed by other projects. So yes, it is there.
If I may, a small comment, Melissa. In our survey, we cut a number of questions in at least 2 rounds to make it manageable. So there are a lot of questions we didn't ask. And I think that was a good solution, because the respondents generally complained that even after the reduction of questions, it was too big. So had we have kept in all the questions we would have liked answers to, we would have no answers. So it's a trade-off there. But also, as Melissa said, this is not about technicalities, but the organization and financing, etc. So, but you will find something about which, for instance, softwares are used, and you will see that the open source is preferred among our respondents.
Maybe could I just come back in also to Marie? I think it's a really important point that you make, that for longer term sustainability, we need to use more open infrastructure and open software, because in the longer term, it's going to be cheaper for us that way. So that's why it's so important. So we need to drive that message forward and actually build that into the advice on sustainability going forward as well. So making those choices early on. Yes, so thank
Vanessa,
you. I see some more questions.
Yes, there is a question in the chat. Funding?
Yes.
are libraries generally having to use existing collections budgets, or are new funds being provided for supporting Diamond?
So that's a really great question. We weren't able to, because again, there were so many questions we wanted to ask. We weren't able to ask that particular question. I'm going to attempt to answer it to a certain extent. We certainly know that there are, of course, the new open access funds. There are actually new open access diamond funds, for example, I've seen in the Netherlands popping up. And there are other funds from research funding organizations that didn't exist before, but amongst libraries, they are also using innovation budgets to do more, either to set up presses or to do to expand on their publishing efforts. But I would really love to know about how libraries are managing this otherwise with their collection budgets, if they are reallocating and how they're doing it. I know that there are also some of you doing that. So I'm actually coming back to all of you. Maybe you would like to share how you were doing it or how you would like to do it. Have we got Margate who would like to respond to that? That would be fantastic if so. Yes.
Yes. Hello, Vanessa. Hi.
Hi.
That's funny because this question we put into the Open Access Tage in Köln. So it's the German Open Access Network that is meeting every year. And that's we prepared one workshop and we exactly do this. And our title is Pledging Diamond and Beyond, something like that. What should libraries finance? So we try to find out what about a library is actually doing when they say we support this initiative or this pledging. So there are coming different initiatives into our mailboxes, and we try to find out where do they come in. So sometimes it's the open access team, it's from the e-media or the team of the e-media, or sometimes within librarians at the university. So we try to find out where do they come in, and then how to decide what to finance. In our case, we're here at the University of Zurich. We have an OGS platform hosting 19 journals at the moment. So we support them in offering the hosting for free. It's kind of a supporting of Diamond Open Access. And then there are other initiatives that also come into our mailboxes. And how should we decide what is important? What is the most help for others? How can we finance that? And also keeping in mind and having that in the head of our journalists themselves on our platform are also struggling with financial issues. So we're in between as a library, not knowing whom to support, how much, and what is the best solution. So this is one workshop that we are trying to give at the conference in Cologne in September. So maybe we find out something on a small scale, but yeah, maybe it is of any help.
Oh, that sounds really great. It actually encourages me to perhaps to finally go to the Open Access Tage again, because that sounds like a really great session. I would love to hear about some of the results if I don't make it. So
we try to publish something, yeah.
Oh,
so just
great.
a small handout or something like that to
That's
build
great.
on that, yeah.
Brilliant.
But that's the key, in fact, yeah. We don't know.
Yes.
And we are in between. We try to support everyone, but there is no budget in the end. And yeah, it's not the answer on where the money is coming from, because we don't know either. Yeah.
So Jan-Erik, a comment, and there is another question in the chat, and after that we are going to breakouts that will be a bit shorter than planned. Is that okay?
I'll try to be brief. First, a comment on the question about funding in general and new funds. Looking at how I see institutions all around Europe describing their budget situation, no, there are no new funding. There's less old funding going around. So everything to be spent on Diamond has to be redirected at some level organization. Not necessarily at the library, but at the institutional or at the national level. This is funds that has to be drawn out of some other activity. So no, no one is printing money to create diamonds. Then Judith Fatala has a question about libraries in the UK are not allowed to spend money. I can't answer that, but there is a question that I have raised for funders, is that, are you aware about the voluntary author contributions, and does your rules allow authors to pay voluntary author contribution and get money on par with, for instance, APCs? It would be strange if you allowed people to pay expensive APCs, but didn't allow the same people to spend smaller amounts on voluntary author contributions. So that those who have money have to think through whether their rules are actually up to the situation. Thanks.
There is another question whether it is planned to put a label on Diamond Open Access. I have a direct message and I will answer. Yes, it is planned to have a kind of a registry of Diamond Open Access journals. It's being developed by the Craft-OA project.
Maybe I'll drop a link in the chat to our notes. So we started talking about the role of funders, because funders were not mentioned a lot into presentations in the introduction, and we felt like they should be doing more to support Diamond, providing grants, and we acknowledge the limitations, that it's easier for them to support researchers from their countries, and usually journals publish research from all over the world. So maybe journal articles don't exactly meet specific funder requirements, national funder requirements, but they should find a way how to support that. And UKRI was mentioned as funders that is showing some flexibilities how libraries could be using budgets, although spending should still be related to UKRI funded research. And we will also discuss that it's really hard for libraries to free up money, so there should be some other sources if possible, maybe some kind of European pool of funding to support Diamond. For the tool suite, academics running journals, so thinking about starting a journal, struggle with some basic questions, like how do you start, how do you think about sustainability, because maybe sustainability is not a topic that academics are very familiar with. So if we could have advice on how to set up a journal according to the current best practice, that would be useful. And even things such as reference style, copyright agreements with authors. These are the questions that academics bring to libraries, because they don't know how to deal with that. Then also technical considerations, because some of journal editors are really technical, and some believe that WordPress is the best tool. And then, of course, if you use WordPress to run your journal, you run into all these issues related to indexing, interoperability, etc. So it would be useful to offer some materials for them as well. And also metadata standards, DOIs, ethics, governance. Then especially early career researchers come to libraries with questions about specific journals or specific publishers, whether they are reliable, and maybe that's what IPSP registry could be useful for, to check whether it's a reputable publisher. And then Open Book Collective was also mentioned as an example that provides a good overview what's available if libraries have money and would like to support Diamond OA publishing. So it would be good to have more information about collective funding business models and also case studies. That's happening. And please, if I miss something.
Thanks a lot. And we still have one, Vanessa and Andrea.
Andrea was with me.
Ah, okay. And so we didn't have any more breakouts, no? If not, then I will briefly, because we are coming closer to the end of the session, I will just share some resources for you, and then if you have additional questions, we may stay a few minutes longer with a group of people who would like to ask questions, and I will announce some further actions. So we are trying to create resources for you, and this tool suite that we were discussing today, it's a tool suite about financial sustainability, and there will be another more general tool suite, and we can discuss this in some new sessions that we will have. So far, we've created 2 fact sheets that are available online. So this link here is where you can find it. So there is a web page, and also they have this printable format or a PDF that you can share. So one is for libraries, what does DIAMAS offer to libraries, and the other is about financial sustainability. So it's a bit more extensive, but it really summarizes the report. Very soon we will have another one about the Diamond Open Access Standard, and this will be the topic of our next session. It will be announced once we have everything ready for the presentation of Diamond Open Access Standard, and it will. This is a standard that is intended for publishers. It can easily be translated for other stakeholders, for example, for journals, into various checklists, etc. And it actually seeks to establish quality-based criteria for, let's say, self-assessment of journals. Hopefully, funders and policymakers will adopt the standards in the evaluation, in research assessments, etc. But for the time being, it will be intended as a self-assessment tool. So that's the next step. And I'll now stop sharing. You have all the contacts, and I will share the link to my presentation because you have more links there. And everything is available on the DIAMAS website. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. We are just now about to close this, but if you're interested to ask a bit more, we can answer the questions. So keep an eye on our social media and the website. There you will find the information about. So Christian had very interesting questions about indexing. So this could be also this discussion could be continued when discussing the Diamond Open Access Standard as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks to presenters and to everyone, and for moderators. It was a really interesting discussion and a very lively one.